Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this interview to discuss Amy Tan, Unintended Memoir, one of the films for the 2021 Cleveland International Film Festival. My name is Tania Benitez, and I am the Adult Programming Assistant here at the Cuyahoga County Public Library. I want to thank our friends at the Cleveland International Film Festival for giving us the opportunity to preview this film and scheduling this interview. Cuyahoga County Public Library has been a proud sponsor of CIFF for 10 years, and we appreciate that the festival continues to present films that spotlight literary themes and notable literary figures year after year. So I want to introduce our very special guest, Karen Pritzker, who is the producer of this documentary, and of course, Amy Tan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
It's so good to be here.
So I want to start off by asking you both to share a little bit about how you met and how this all came to be.
I'll go for, the true thing is that Amy and I have never met in person. I've heard about her for years from my dear friend and her dear friend Jamie Redford, who is the director of this film, who did such a beautiful and amazing job. And I begged him, we were doing another film, and I begged him to use Amy and follow Amy in her rock and roll life, which you'll get to see a little bit in this documentary, because Jamie and I were doing a film on play. And Amy's wisdom about creativity, about play, was just so evident. And I said, Jamie, there must be a film about Amy, just simply with Amy as the main character. So he was like, oh, I don't think Amy's going to want to do that. Right? And I was like, okay, but couldn't you ask? Because she has so much to say, and she's a multifaceted person in our very complicated world that we're living in. There are some clear things that she holds dear, understands, and sees with integrity and intelligence that I thought other people needed to hear, and so did Jamie, who knew her far better than I did. I knew her through her art. So Jamie charmed Amy into agreeing to do this, which it was why it's very unintended. So we were just very lucky that way. And I would say that their friendship and both artists, connecting as friends and in so many levels shines through in the film. And I'm dying to meet Amy in person. We've had many conversations over Zoom, but I'm in the East, they're in the West, and this, and COVID was happening, and Jamie was very ill as he completed this film and living in California, and passed away before it was, bow tied on, completely finished. Amy and I have had to work together for our friend and coworker, and Amy's just been amazing through that process as well.
And is it true, Amy, that you had some reservations about doing this?
Well, you have to understand that I was at a point in my life where I thought, I'm going to retire from public life now, and I'm going to be a lot more private. And when Jamie mentioned something, and I explained that to him, and we just kept talking about these subjects that were interesting to him that would ultimately be in the film. And he kept saying, I think you have a lot to say to the world. And I said, I'm really not that famous. American Masters, that's, because this documentary would be shown on American Masters, I thought, you ought to find somebody famous, and he just kept charming me. And one of the reasons I decided to do this with Jamie is that there was absolute trust in working with him, and the kind of sincerity that he had and why he thought it was important. I mean, you have to understand, Jamie is all about giving to the world. And here I was, just, oh no, I want my privacy. I also knew that Jamie was very ill. I didn't think he would pass away so soon, but I knew he was very ill. And as he kept talking about this, I was so honored by how much he knew about me through reading my work and the two books, nonfiction books that I'd written that were also unintentional memoirs in a way. And so I said to him one day, you know, you don't need any more uncertainty in your life. I said, let's just do this, no hesitations. And, you know, hoping all along that he wouldn't regret this, Karen, and he would not regret this decision. So.
Gotcha. I'm curious, what were some of the biggest surprises for you, Amy and Karen, while making this?
Boy, I mean, first of all, for me as the subject, it was, you know, the approach to talking about my life, not so much in the ways that other people looked at my life as being an Asian American, or as being mother and daughter themes, as though I'm some kind of expert. And it really had a great deal of focus on trauma and pain and survival and resilience, and which made me think it was a much more interesting way of looking at one's life, you know, emotionally. And I think also that I would not have the control over how this story would be told. You know, this is not really a memoir because I'm not the one writing it. And that was the reason why I had to have absolute trust in the process. Jamie did show me, you know, a few minutes of a test when he was trying to lure me into doing this, and it was fabulous. He used animation. So I was very impressed with that. And I knew artistically it would be beautiful, and that I had this trust. So I knew he would not do anything that would embarrass me, like have me posed in a bathtub, a bubble bath or something like that. So that's, you know, and the surprise, you know, the surprise just had to do with the kinds of things that came out as a result of talking intimately to him, even though a camera was focused on me.
Gotcha. And you, Karen, what were some of the surprises for you?
Well, you know, in the beginning, I was really thinking about, you know, creativity and play and sort of your life as an artist, because Jamie and I spent a lot of my other life involved in about childhood trauma and various causes, and I had, you know, connected to that. And Jamie and I had made 2 films on the effects of childhood trauma together that I had dragged him into doing, and that he had done such an amazing job. And because he does dive in and feels and really embeds himself into so many things, obviously from reading Amy's books, I knew there was trauma there, but I really thought we were sort of going on a different, you know, it'd be an American master, you know, the wise person, but he was so informed by that experience of thinking about trauma through many different lenses already. And I feel, and Amy's been thinking about it for decades and imagining and reimagining. And I think the surprise was, I remember saying to, we've made another film. It is a KPJR film. It's actually about trauma, not entirely and not in a traumatic way, but Amy's ability to both transmute and imagine and make things different, both for herself and for readers, and sort of how that process was working in her own life, was not surprised, but a revelation and a beautiful thing to see.
Great. So Amy, you mentioned the test that they shared with you with these animations, and that's one of the features of the film that I found really lovely is the use of animations to help tell the story. Can either of you shed some light on where the inspiration for including that in the film came from? And Amy, did you provide any inspiration for those drawings yourself, since I know that you yourself are an artist?
Bird artist, amateur bird artist. Karen, well, you probably know more about the animation than I do.
Jamie loved
Yeah.
animation. I love animation. It has been in every single one of our films, animated sequences. You know, and often taking a complex scientific idea or something very difficult to handle, and also in sort of reenacting Amy's life and getting close to memory. There are only so many sepia toned pictures you want to use or see, and an animator is able to illuminate and use the things that she's feeling and seeing in a you know, completely different way. And while he has done animation before, I think it's the most beautifully used in this film. And the animator is a young woman from Chile, also who never met Amy, but you know, but Jamie and she worked together to, you know, really, you know, and there'd be sections, animated sequence here, and you know, they'd have long discussions, and then came these beautiful, beautiful sequences.
Yeah, I was really glad to see that, because I imagined this documentary would have a lot of talking head kind of stuff. And there I would be relating something, and you just see me, and you know, somebody's watching and they get a little bored seeing and they'll notice like, oh, her hair is askew, or you know, start noticing the wrong things. But by adding the animation, it really matched the emotions of what the story was that I was telling. And in fact, it was revelatory to me to see that with the emotions, the impact was, again, I felt it watching the actual film. And I think that makes it much more powerful to the viewer as well. You know, so much of this, telling it out loud to somebody in a very personal context, came out differently than the way I've talked about it before, written about it. And so to see that combination come together was it was gratifying to me, because it was as though I was understanding something differently as well.
Wow.
So I love that part of it. As well as another element that Jamie told me about but hadn't inserted by the time he showed me the film, and that was the music. Catherine Bostic, who was incredible, you know, with the piano music. You know, failed pianist, and so and a wannabe composer of piano preludes or something. She just
She offered to work with you.
Job. Yeah, no.
You should take her up on it.
I will study what she does with her music. I mean, I'm only going to do like a 9-note theme or something I can do variations off of. But, you know, I just very appreciated these elements that were put in there. And mind you, I'm not making this film, I'm the subject. And so I'm just providing interviews and materials, and then I get to see how it's been put together. But just gratified. That's the major word I would use to talk about my reaction, that I was just grateful for how he created a narrative that really showed why I became a writer, how it was almost inevitable that I would become a writer.
Mm-hmm. Did you get to watch the film as it was being created, or did you wait until the end to see the whole thing in its completion?
I waited. I never asked Jamie to send me anything. And I think that's better for an artist, because
Yes.
I wouldn't want somebody to read a book when I was partway through and knowing I was going to change things later and that materials were in flux. I kept dumping box after box on him as I was clearing out my garage, saying, hey, Jamie, I found all these VHS tapes. I'm going to throw them away. Do you want to look at any of them? And he'd say, yes, and he'd come over and get them. So there'd be possibly a whole new element in the film. And so it really would have served.
Anyway, right. And that's why you have to have trust, because
absolutely
you have to have the trust to go, you go with it and create your, Jamie creates his own piece of art that we can, and we welcomed Amy's feedback. She gave some great feedback, but at the end also to see it in its where you're going completely. Because it's hard to say, oh, well, why do we have this scene in here? Well, you need it because in the end, and so, we were grateful. I mean, I think you can only do something like this when there is this much trust. And that's what made it work out, in the way that Jamie was very happy with it going in. There was very little that was done afterward except adding things he wanted. And Amy was happy. And as I told Amy, the happiest day was when Amy responded to the email that, she approved of it, because we went into the whole process. Look, if you don't like it in the end, we'll stop. We won't do this. This was not, and we all felt that way. And so I think, this is a film we all felt good about in the end.
I think the only request that I had made when Jamie and I were talking about this, absolute trust, do what you want. And I just made a request that this not be something where there would be a lot of famous people talking about me, talking heads. Oh, she's wonderful. They're not going to say anything that bad about me, or inside. It would all be, wonderful praise. And I don't think you would have really gotten a sense of really who I am. And Jamie agreed. He had just one thought that maybe we'd include somebody who was well known to talk about with me, this a shared sense of what it is to become famous. And I said, I don't think I'm that famous, but also I think if you want to know what fame is about and how it might affect you, you can ask your dad. And we agreed right away, not to do the fame thing. Yeah.
But you did agree, which was wonderful. And I think I think that people who speak in the film, her childhood best friend Sandy, her brother. These people are the most important voices, and you do understand the making of a writer. But the view from, Isabel Allende, who works in a different vein, and Kevin Kwan, and I said to Jamie, well, maybe it'd be because they also are laboring in the vineyard in a different way, but they get it. And no one wanted lots of talking heads, but I was grateful for the participation of those two, because I feel there is a way that sometimes another voice can shed light.
I guess I didn't think of them as famous because they are friends.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Kevin and I had been doing. But
I agree with you. No one wanted a talking head movie.
No. And what they said was just so wonderful. So, heartening to me, their comments were, I thought were perfect. Really grateful to them for that.
Great. I will say though, you're famous when you're on The Simpsons. So that's how
that was a bit of nepotism, so to speak, a kind of nepotism. Matt Groening and I are in a rock band, the Rock Bottom Remainders, and he did ask two of us, Stephen King and I, to be in a Simpsons cartoon about going to a literary festival and being a little obnoxious. So
That's great. Yeah, I think that's that was such a pleasant surprise to me to see that, like, how your career has taken you to doing these like really having these really cool opportunities, being on The Simpsons, being in that rock band. Like, I just think it's so it's kind of beautiful how having a career in writing, you know, you find yourself in unexpected places because of it.
yeah, that is an amazing part of, what's happened to me in my life. I have to sit back every now and then and say, wow, this is amazing that I get to meet these people and do these crazy things, and hopefully still be respected as a writer. Yeah, really, I have been lucky to meet a lot of wonderful people since being published, including Karen and Jamie, who've made these very important films. So, being part of that team also was based on what they've done in the past.
Mhm. I was really struck with how intentional, Amy, you were in really taking the time to listen to your mother's stories about where she came from and her life. I'm curious, what advice do you have of other children of immigrant parents who may have that same desire to connect, but
Yeah.
not knowing where to begin?
I think that what happened to me is what I think happens to a lot of people, whether they have immigrant parents or not. And that is that we don't listen to those stories, or they're told to us obliquely in the way of advice and warnings and encouragement. And some of these do have a history to them. I did not want to hear my mother's story. She told them to me for hours, sometimes when she was upset. And it wasn't until I started writing that I began to listen much more intentionally. I do think that other people might look at this documentary and say, this is something I need to know also about my parents, my grandparents, the history, because you can see patterns that have been passed along from generation to generation. And it sometimes has been transformed, but there could be ones that have been direct, this influence. So in the case of my grandmother, she committed suicide in despair from not having choices. She did not want to be put down or put in her place, and she killed herself. She had no other choice. My mother became suicidal, and for all of our time together, suicidal threats were part of it. And I just grew up under this uncertainty. Fortunately for me, this intolerance of condescension and people trying to put me in my place is what I inherited from my mother and in that sense from my grandmother. But I had choices, and I was able to make the choice to become a writer and to write about things that I felt that had come through in a way through this long generational line. The emotions, the reactions I have that are ingrained in me, that are part of upraising. When we talk about how we are influenced by our parents, and especially mothers by their daughters by their mothers. And you don't want to take on these certain traits, and yet you do. But I do think that what I got were the other facet of that instead of it just being warnings, that it had to do with my being prepared and realistic, for example.
Yeah, I think that's one of the kind of beautiful things about this documentary and about the stories that you write, Amy, is that, you know, I myself being a daughter of immigrants, I saw so much that I could relate to, you know, even though we don't have the same experience, there's so many things that are common. So I think that that's something that audiences will really, you know, feel when watching this film.
You know, I do have to mention something. One of the great things that Jamie did was in looking up all those old VHS tapes, he digitized them, which enabled me to see them as well. But I saw they were included in the documentary. There's one in particular where my mother is talking about her first husband, and it reaches some delicate points about her talking about sex. And I was videoing, you know, doing the video of this, and you'll notice maybe it sounds like I'm very bored, because every now and then you'll just hear me, she's saying something very dramatic, very emotional, and you just hear me saying, I had to force myself to be as unobtrusive as possible and just keep filming. And the only time I would say something to her to bring her back into the scene, because she relived things in a PTSD kind of manner, is to say, what kind of dinner did you have, or something, just to bring her back. So when you watch that, you might notice I say very, very little. My mother also, she acted very shy in the beginning, and then she would say, okay, maybe you want to turn off the camera because I'm going to talk sex things. And of course I just kept the camera on. But so she, in that one segment, she talked quite extensively about the sexual abuse. And in this one segment, it does talk about what she had to endure, which was horrendous, and why, you know, I could see why she had these terrible warnings to me about men. Men will destroy you. Men will want to make you kill yourself. Don't ever depend on men. Get a job so you can run away whenever you want. You know, those were the kind of messages, and I didn't know where they came from. And you can see in the documentary where they came from.
Yeah. Yeah, clearly this documentary is a very intimate look into, you know, into what goes into your writing and your life. Karen, as a producer, as part of the team that is creating this documentary, how do you prepare to tell such an intimate story?
With integrity and honesty, you hope, and also working with subjects of, we can take this out, but let's keep going, you know, and see where we're at. Because in the end, when you're working, especially with somebody like Amy, who is a truth teller, she uses fiction to tell the truth, but you know, that is what she's mining and looking for. And so I think you just prepare by, you know, being yourself. And I think the other beauty of this film is all of our parents are mysteries. We're born 20, 35 years after they've had complete full lives, and they become different as they become parents. Too, it changes them and their circumstances. And not many of us, it's what Amy's bravery in going back to understand, to unpeel. Most of us, or at least I don't do, and it's not even about immigrant or not immigrant. There are so many things we don't know, and we are simply the receivers of, well, why is she angry, or why is she suicidal? You know, and we don't understand. And this movie, I think, just shows a whole evolution in your life of coming as an adult to then see your mother's adult difficulties when she was even younger than you, and how that reacts. And that Amy, you have created a life. You haven't had to run away. Amy's been, happily married to the same man she met in college. She's had a very different life, and been able to look in the security of that back to see these other things. And it's, to me, that evolution and understanding and digging is just inspirational, because there's all so much we have to discover about ourselves. But Amy really does it.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, Amy, how you were giving box after box of photographs and all this memorabilia. Did you find that you had to dig a lot deeper for this project versus writing?
Well, Jamie wanted everything. I thought we would be selective. In the beginning, we were selective. I picked out things I thought might be relevant, and then found out that he would go through the entire box and pick out more things. And the fact that he wanted these old tapes, these old videos that were, I thought were just trash. And the fact that he took those as well went deeper in a different way from my books. I'd be looking at scraps of paper and letters from my mother, which, he included as well. But just to remind me of things, almost like talismans. I would use it that way. And so they were used in the documentary in a different way.
What do you hope your audiences take away from this film? I'm curious from the both of you, what are you hoping that people receive and take away?
I think that everybody can look at their life as the continuation of something that started a long time ago. That it is these, it's sort of like a Rube Goldberg kind of situation where you have various concatenations of things and they all fall in place, but suddenly it makes a zigzag and goes to this surprising area. And how you get to where you are includes all of these pieces, including the detours and especially the difficulties, turmoil, difficulties, conflicts. All of these things do much more to cause you to question your life and shape who you are, because you have to fight for it. And I think that would be something people might see in the film, that they have just as much a story, an interesting story in their lives. And some of it has to do with what has not been told by their ancestors or their parents, or even their siblings. I've never heard my brother talk about these things in that way, or my best friend talking about me in quite the same way. And I think that would be useful. I would, and I hope that people looking at the documentary would start to say to themselves, gee, maybe I should do some video of my parents and learn more about their lives and really keep that. You don't have to have an American Masters documentary made on you. You can, make your own documentary that will be valuable for the future generations.
And Karen?
Beautifully said. I would say the exact what she said, because but that was, and as I said, the bravery and willingness to go forward and talk to your mom, that's really hard to do for a lot of people. And you made it look easy, and I know it wasn't, but in that way, that is inspiring. It's a word that gets overused, but you are.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think a lot of people will be inspired to kind of look into their past and look at where they came from And if they're lucky enough to still have their parents around to reach out and see, you know, what are the things that kind of culminated to where I am right now. So I think that will definitely, you know, light a fire in people's hearts for sure.
But also the aspect of also turning your heart toward being receptive and not angry to your mother. And we see that process even from the it's not an angry it's a really wanting to know. And
Yeah.
that is the beautiful, but also which inspired me in the first place, Amy's ability, wanting, which we can all do. Her day job is writing and unearthing her joy in using her skills as being such a person who can observe things so well. She translates into the joy of looking at birds and creating, a beautiful image on paper. And she doesn't have to get paid for it. She doesn't have to do it for somebody else. She does it for herself. And, understanding the many ways in which you can balance doing the difficult things and finding the things that you love to do was also a big part of this for us. As I said, this came out of wanting to work with you on a feature about play and joy. It is not all sadness and bravery and difficult. In that way, you are a master because you have figured out what is the hardest thing in life: balancing things and doing the hard stuff and doing the joyful stuff, both.
Absolutely. Great. And Amy, I know that you said that you're kind of intentionally living your life a little bit more privately now, but are you working on anything, or, what's next for you? Is there anything that we can watch out for?
Well, my quest for obscurity got a little derailed by the documentary, and happily so, because I really got a lot from the documentary and the whole process of doing it and understanding some things in another way. And I think as a result of doing the documentary, it made me much more willing to talk about my life and what shaped me to be a writer and how that goes into my work. So one of the things I did after they finished pretty much the documentary and I got to see it was I did a master class. And I never thought I would teach, but I found what I wanted to do was teach a class that was based on emotional memory and how that goes into stories. How do you relive it? And it was the same thing that I got from the one segment Jamie did where in the car with the animation of my mother, about to kill herself, how I can take that same visceral memory from that moment and use it in a story to make it believable. Doesn't have to be the exact same situation, but it is the emotional memory that is the truth about how we feel, how we survive, how we see things and as children, and then looking back with a different understanding.
Great. Well, thank you both again so much for being here with us. Truly, I loved talking to both of you and learning a little bit more about the process of creating this wonderful documentary. And to everyone, I highly recommend that you check this out if you're going to the film festival. I also want to remind everybody that that you can get $1 off this film and other films in the festival, which runs April 7th through the 20th. And just use the promo code FILM45, that's FILM 45, all caps, at checkout to have the discount applied to each film in your cart. And for more information about the festival, you can go to clevelandfilm.org. So thank you again, Karen and Amy, so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.